For the next few days, the training continued. The Yilari warriors kept showing off their power, lifting heavy weapons, smashing through obstacles, and using energy shields that glowed in the air. They moved fast, hit hard, and shouted loud. But Leo did something else. He watched. He learned. And he waited. He didn't try to be the strongest or the fastest. Instead, he stayed calm, studied their moves, and quietly improved his own. During one training session, a Yilari weapon overheated and exploded during a drill. A huge piece of metal flew toward two young Yilari recruits who weren't paying attention. Without thinking, Leo ran. He threw himself forward, pushed both recruits aside, and took the hit on his armored shoulder. The piece bounced off and rolled away. He stood up, brushing dust off his chest. Everyone froze. Even Princess Nera stood from her seat. "You saved them," one of the recruits said, shocked. Leo simply nodded. "Next time, keep your eyes forward." The Yilari commander stepped forward and saluted him. "A rare honor. You have earned my respect, human." Whispers spread again. Some warriors began to greet Leo in the halls. One even offered him a rare Yilari energy bar, a gesture of friendship. But Naira didn't like it. That evening, she paced inside the royal garden, her long dress brushing against glowing flowers. "Why are they treating him like a hero?" she said aloud. "He didn't even win a real battle." An old advisor stood nearby. "Princess," he said gently, "sometimes true strength is not about power. Sometimes it's about heart." She turned away. "He's just a soldier, nothing more." But the image of Leo risking himself for two Yilari youths stayed in her mind. Later that night, Leo sat alone near the courtyard, polishing his gear. A few warriors passed by and nodded to him. He gave a small smile in return. He didn't come to show off. He came to survive, to build peace, and to prove that humans were not to be underestimated. As he looked up at the stars, he thought about home. Earth was far away, but his duty was here now. And if that meant earning respect in silence, he was ready for it. Meanwhile, Princess Naira looked at the same stars from her high balcony. She crossed her arms and whispered, "Let's see how brave he is when I challenge him myself." Her pride was still strong, but something else had started to grow beneath it. Curiosity. That evening, Princess Nera wandered through the royal palace gardens, her mind in a haze. The sun was setting behind the tall crystal towers, casting long shadows across the shimmering pathways. The sounds of evening birds echoed softly in the distance, but Naira barely noticed. Her thoughts kept returning to Leo, to the duel that had unfolded before the entire court. She had expected to show him the power and pride of the Yilari. She had expected him to be easily defeated, just like so many others had before him. But she was wrong. He had done more than just survive the fight. He had made her rethink everything she had known about strength. At first, she had seen Leo as nothing more than a human soldier, a small part of a foreign delegation. She had dismissed him quickly, thinking of him as weak, unworthy of her attention. But the way he had fought, the way he had remained calm and focused even when faced with her best efforts, Naira couldn't deny that she had underestimated him. As she walked, Naira's fingers brushed against the soft petals of the royal flowers. Her mind was still tangled in confusion. How had this human managed to gain her respect in such a short time? How had his quiet strength shattered the pride she had held for so long? Naira stopped in front of a small fountain, the water sparkling under the twin moons. She knelt beside it, gazing at her reflection. Her face was still flushed with the aftermath of the fight. She was the princess of Saltharis, the heir to a powerful empire, and yet she had felt something stir inside her, a feeling she wasn't used to. It wasn't anger. It wasn't humiliation. It was something deeper. Humility. She had seen it in Leo's eyes when he fought. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He fought with the quiet confidence of someone who knew that strength wasn't just about power. It was about knowing when to stand firm and when to step aside. It was about learning, adapting, and having the courage to face challenges without fear. Naira's fingers tightened around the stone edge of the fountain. She had always been taught that being the strongest was the only way to command respect. But Leo had shown her that there was more to leadership, more to strength, than sheer force. It was about honor, about doing what was right, even when no one was watching. The sound of footsteps broke her thoughts. Naira turned to find her old advisor, Raylan, standing behind her. He had been with her since childhood, guiding her, teaching her the ways of the court and the ways of the warriors. But even Raylan had never been able to teach her what Leo had. "Your Highness," Raylan said softly, "it seems the human soldier has earned your respect." Naira didn't answer immediately. She just looked at him, her mind racing. "I was wrong," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Raylan raised an eyebrow. "About what, Princess?" The next day, the sun rose gently over the palace, casting a soft golden light on the royal courtyard. Naira stood near the palace gates, her long robes flowing behind her as she waited for Leo to arrive. She had spent the night reflecting on everything that had happened, on the duel, on the quiet strength of the human soldier, and on how her perspective had changed. She hadn't expected it. She hadn't expected Leo to make her question her pride, her beliefs, and her view of what true strength really was. But he had done it without even trying to, simply by being himself. And now she needed to apologize. As the morning air settled around her, Naira took a deep breath. She had always been taught to be confident, to be proud, to never show weakness. But today, she was going to do something different. She was going to show Leo that she had learned something from their fight. She was going to admit that she was wrong. The sound of footsteps reached her ears, and she turned to see Leo walking toward her. His posture was calm, his expression neutral as always. He was wearing his usual simple gear, no armor, no weapons, just the same quiet confidence that had earned her respect. "Good morning, Princess." Leo greeted her with a small nod. Naira smiled, though it was a little hesitant. She took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "I wanted to speak with you, Leo," she said, her voice softer than usual. "About yesterday." Leo raised an eyebrow, but he said nothing. He simply waited for her to continue. "I was wrong," Naira continued, her eyes meeting his. "When we first met, I thought humans were weak, that you didn't stand a chance against us. I thought that strength meant power and nothing else. But you've shown me that true strength is something different. It's not just about fighting hard or being the strongest. It's about honor, courage, and knowing when to fight and when to show restraint." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I should have seen that sooner. I apologize for how I treated you." Leo stood still, his expression unreadable. He had expected many things from Naira, but not this, not an apology. He nodded slowly, accepting her words. "Apology accepted, Princess. I didn't come here to make you change your mind. I only wanted to show that humans aren't so different from Yalari after all. We all have our strengths." Naira smiled again, this time more confidently. She had made her peace with her pride, and she was ready to move forward. "Thank you for understanding, Leo," she said. "And I would like to offer you something." Leo tilted his head slightly, intrigued. "What's that?" "I want to invite you to the royal palace," Naira said, her eyes shining with a new determination. "Not just as a soldier, but as a guest. I want to learn more about Earth and your people. You've proven that humans have much more to offer than I gave you credit for." Leo thought for a moment. He hadn't expected such an offer, but he knew this was a turning point, not just for him, but for the relationship between Earth and the Yalari Empire. "I would be honored, Princess." Naira gave a small, genuine smile. "It's a start, then." As they walked together toward the palace, the tension between them had faded. What had once been a rivalry had turned into a newfound respect, and both knew that this was only the beginning of something much greater, something that could change the course of their lives and perhaps the future of their worlds. About strength, Naira replied, her eyes locked on her reflection in the water. I thought strength was about power, but Leo has shown me that true strength is about more than that. It's about wisdom, about knowing yourself, about what you stand for. Raylan nodded slowly. It seems the human soldier has taught you a valuable lesson. Naira turned to face him. Yes, he has, and I will not forget it. That evening, Princess Naira wandered through the royal palace gardens, her mind in a haze. The sun was setting behind the tall crystal towers, casting long shadows across the shimmering pathways. The sounds of evening birds echoed softly in the distance, but Naira barely noticed. Her thoughts kept returning to Leo, to the duel that had unfolded before the entire court. She had expected to show him the power and pride of the Yllari. She had expected him to be easily defeated, just like so many others had before him. But she was wrong. He had done more than just survive the fight. He had made her rethink everything she had known about strength. At first, she had seen Leo as nothing more than a human soldier, a small part of a foreign delegation. She had dismissed him quickly, thinking of him as weak, unworthy of her attention. But the way he had fought, the way he had remained calm and focused even when faced with her best efforts, Naira couldn't deny that she had underestimated him. As she walked, Naira's fingers brushed against the soft petals of the royal flowers. Her mind was still tangled in confusion. How had this human managed to gain her respect in such a short time? How had his quiet strength shattered the pride she had held for so long? Naira stopped in front of a small fountain, the water sparkling under the twin moons. She knelt beside it, gazing at her reflection. Her face was still flushed with the aftermath of the fight. She was the princess of Saltheris, the heir to a powerful empire, and yet she had felt something stir inside her, a feeling she wasn't used to. It wasn't anger. It wasn't humiliation. It was something deeper. Humility. She had seen it in Leo's eyes when he fought. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He fought with the quiet confidence of someone who knew that strength wasn't just about power. It was about knowing when to stand firm and when to step aside. It was about learning, adapting, and having the courage to face challenges without fear. Naira's fingers tightened around the stone edge of the fountain. She had always been taught that being the strongest was the only way to command respect. But Leo had shown her that there was more to leadership, more to strength than sheer force. It was about honor, about doing what was right, even when no one was watching. The sound of footsteps broke her thoughts. Naira turned to find her old advisor, Raylan, standing behind her. He had been with her since childhood, guiding her, teaching her the ways of the court and the ways of the warriors. But even Raylan had never been able to teach her what Leo had. "Your Highness," Raylan said softly, "it seems the human soldier has earned your respect." Naira didn't answer immediately. She just looked at him, her mind racing. "I was wrong," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Raylan raised an eyebrow. "About what, princess?" "About strength," Naira replied, her eyes locked on her reflection in the water. "I thought strength was about power, but Leo has shown me that true strength is about more than that. It's about wisdom, about knowing yourself, about what you stand for." Raylan nodded slowly. "It seems the human soldier has taught you a valuable lesson." Naira turned to face him. "Yes, he has, and I will not forget it." The grand hall was filled with the hum of conversation, but it wasn't the usual political chatter. Today, something else was in the air, a sense of unity, of change. Naira stood at the center of the room, surrounded by her advisors, warriors, and diplomats from Earth. For the first time, there was no distinction between humans and Yllari. Both sides had come together, not because they had to, but because they had chosen to. The moment was historic, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. Leo stood beside Naira, dressed in simple clothes but no longer seen as an outsider. He had been invited into the royal court, not as a soldier, but as a true ally. His heart felt lighter than it ever had before, knowing that the journey he had started on Earth with the goal of proving humanity's worth, had come so far. Naira raised her hand, calling the room to attention. The nobles and warriors quieted, watching her closely. She looked out across the sea of faces, her gaze steady, but her heart full of a new sense of purpose. "We are here today to mark the beginning of a new chapter," she said, her voice clear. "A chapter where the Yilari Empire and Earth are no longer strangers or enemies, but allies." Her eyes found Leo, and for a moment, her gaze softened. "We've learned much from each other, and it is time for us to share our strengths, our wisdom, and our future." There was a soft murmur through the crowd. This was a bold move for Naira, for her people, but she knew it was the right one. The fight with Leo had opened her eyes, and now she was ready to lead her people into a future where they worked with humans, not against them. Leo stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment. He had never expected this when he first landed on Soltheris. He thought he was just a soldier sent to represent Earth. Now, he was part of something much bigger, something that could change the galaxy. "I never came here to prove Earth was better," Leo said, his voice carrying across the room. "I came here to show that humans have value, not because of our strength or power, but because of our hearts, our courage, and our ability to learn from each other." His words were simple, but they struck a chord with everyone in the room. The Yilari had long valued their own pride, but they now saw the worth in humility and respect. Naira turned to the assembled court, addressing them with the same conviction she had shown during the duel. "Let this moment be a symbol of everything we can accomplish together. We will learn from Earth's wisdom, and in turn, we will share our knowledge. We are no longer two separate worlds. We are one." The crowd stood, a ripple of applause spreading throughout the room. There was no hesitation, no doubt. This was the beginning of a new era, one where two different peoples had chosen to stand side by side, not as rivals, but as allies. Leo smiled as he stood beside Naira, the sound of clapping echoing in his ears. For the first time since he had stepped onto this alien world, he felt truly at home. As the room filled with cheers, Naira turned to Leo. She nodded with a quiet smile, acknowledging everything they had been through together. "The future is ours, Leo," she said softly. "Together." And in that moment, they both knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but it would be worth every step. The next morning, the sun had barely risen over Xaltheris when the training horns echoed across the royal grounds. Leo stood ready outside the barracks, his armor strapped neatly, his helmet tucked under his arm. The Yilari warriors, dressed in glowing silver combat suits, gathered in rows, each taller and broader than Leo. Princess Naira sat on a raised platform above the training grounds, watching from her throne-like seat. Her eyes stayed fixed on the human. She wanted to see him fail. "Human," barked one of the Yilari commanders, "you will join the first formation. Try to keep up." Leo nodded politely and moved into position. His body moved with calm control, his face focused. The training began with a test of strength. The Yilari lifted heavy stone blocks above their heads with ease. When Leo's turn came, he bent his knees, gripped the block, and slowly lifted it with effort. The crowd chuckled. Naira smirked. But Leo didn't react. He placed the stone down gently and moved on. Next was a speed drill through moving laser walls. Many Yilari charged with raw power and missed the timing. Leo watched carefully, studying the rhythm. Then, when it was his turn, he ran, not with speed, but with precision. He slipped through the beams without touching a single one. The whispering started. "Did you see that?" He calculated the pattern. Humans are supposed to be clumsy. Princess Naira leaned forward, her smile fading slightly. During a hand-to-hand sparring round, Leo was paired with a bulky Yilari warrior twice his size. The Yilari charged at him with loud roars and wide swings. Leo didn't block with strength. He sidestepped, ducked, and moved with surprising grace. Then, using the alien's momentum, he flipped the Yilari over his shoulder, flat on the ground. Gasps filled the air. Naira's eyes widened. She clenched the edge of her seat. How did he do that? One of the nobles whispered. The commander called for a break. Leo sat alone under a shade tree, sipping water. Some of the Yilari glanced at him differently now. A few even nodded in quiet respect. But not Naira. She rose from her seat and walked toward the edge of the training platform. He's just lucky, she muttered to herself. Let's see how long that lasts. Leo looked up at her from across the grounds. Their eyes met for the first time, not as strangers, but as warriors from two very different worlds. She didn't speak. He didn't smile. But something had already changed between them, and neither of them knew it yet. The sky above Saltharis shimmered with two suns as the human dropship landed on the royal landing pad. Dust swirled in the warm air as a tall figure stepped out. He was a human soldier, dressed in light body armor, holding the simple pack on his back. His name was Leo, and he had been chosen as part of Earth's peacekeeping exchange program with the Yilari Empire. The Yilari people were taller, faster, and believed themselves to be far more advanced than humans. They lived in shining cities, built with floating crystals and smooth towers that glowed under their suns. At the center of all this was the royal palace, and inside it, Princess Naira. Naira was young by her people's standards, only 19 in Earth years. She had been raised with pride, trained in royal combat, and told from birth that Yilari were the strongest warriors in the galaxy. So when she heard that Earth was sending a single soldier to join their elite guard, she laughed out loud in front of the court. A single human. They must think this is a joke, she said, flipping her long hair over one shoulder. Her guards chuckled nervously. None of them dared to correct her. To them, humans were still newcomers in the galactic community, loud, stubborn, and slow. But when Princess Naira saw Leo walking toward the palace for the first time, her smile faded for a moment. He didn't carry himself like a fool. He walked calmly, as if used to being in dangerous places. His armor was not shining or fancy, just simple and scratched from real battles. Still, she narrowed her eyes and whispered, "Let's see how long he lasts." Later that day in the royal hall, Leo stood before the council of nobles. He gave a short and respectful greeting in fluent Yilari, which caused a few surprised glances. Naira stepped forward. "You may be Earth's best," she said in a loud voice, "but here, even our children can fight better than your kind." Leo didn't react. He looked at her with calm eyes and simply said, "Then I look forward to learning from them." The room went quiet. No anger, no challenge, just a calm reply. Naira frowned. She had expected him to get defensive, maybe even offended. Instead, he showed discipline. That made her curious, though she would never admit it. As Leo was taken to the warrior barracks, some of the Yilari soldiers whispered and stared. A few laughed behind his back. But Leo just unpacked his things, checked his gear, and sat down to write a message to his team back home. He had been sent to represent Earth, but he knew something others didn't. He wasn't here to show off. He was here to prove what a human could do, without needing to say a word. The next morning, the royal courtyard buzzed with excitement. It wasn't just another training day. Today, Princess Naira had announced a challenge. The entire royal court was gathered around, waiting for the event to begin. Leo stood among the warriors, his arms crossed, his expression calm. He wasn't sure what the challenge would be, but he was ready for anything. Naira stepped forward, her golden armor gleaming under the twin suns. Her eyes were fixed on Leo as she addressed the crowd. "Today, I will personally challenge this human soldier to a duel. I want to see for myself if he truly belongs in the ranks of Yilari warriors." The crowd murmured, some with excitement, others with skepticism. This was no ordinary duel. It was a public display of honor, and Naira wasn't known to lose. Leo's heart didn't race. He had been in real battles before. This wasn't about winning or losing. This was about showing respect. He nodded once and walked to the center of the arena. The air felt thick with tension as Naira approached him. Her movements were fluid, confident, like a dancer preparing for battle. She unsheathed her blade, a glowing weapon that hummed with energy. "We'll fight without armor," she said, her voice cool and commanding. "I don't need armor to prove my strength." Leo hesitated for a moment, then slowly removed his helmet and set it aside. His armor was simple compared to Naira's, but it had been with him through many battles. He unstrapped his chest plate and placed it down, showing only the worn-out training gear underneath. The arena fell silent. Naira smirked, thinking the human would back down or falter. But Leo stood tall, his eyes focused on her. There was no fear in his gaze, only calm determination. The fight began. Naira charged first, her blade cutting through the air. Leo didn't flinch. He moved to the side with quick, precise steps. He wasn't fast like the Yllari, but he didn't need to be. He read her movements, anticipating every strike. When her blade came too close, Leo used his body to redirect the force, knocking her off balance. The crowd gasped. Naira recovered quickly, fury flashing in her eyes. She attacked with more force, her strikes faster and more aggressive. Leo, however, never stopped moving. He ducked, sidestepped, and evaded. His training on Earth had taught him something the Yllari didn't seem to understand. Sometimes, it wasn't about strength. It was about control, timing, and using the environment around you. Naira's frustration grew as Leo continued to dodge, his movements smooth and calculated. The more she attacked, the more she found herself tiring. It wasn't long before she realized that Leo wasn't trying to win. He was showing her something else. His every move was a challenge to her pride, a silent message that power wasn't everything. And then, in a swift motion, Leo disarmed her. Her glowing blade flew from her hand and clattered to the ground. The arena fell silent once again. Naira stood frozen, her chest heaving with exertion. She had never been disarmed like this before, not even by the greatest of Yllari warriors. Leo didn't advance. He simply stepped back and bowed his head. "I yield," he said softly, not as a defeat, but as a gesture of respect. The crowd erupted into whispers. Naira was speechless, standing there with wide eyes. Her pride had been shattered, but something else had been awakened inside her. A realization that maybe, just maybe, the human soldier was more than what she had imagined. The ceremony was unlike any other the Yllari Empire had seen. It was not marked by grand speeches or formalities, but by a quiet understanding that something incredible was happening. The court was alive with excitement, but there was no chaos. No one doubted that this moment, this alliance, was not only important for Earth and the Yllari, but for the galaxy as a whole. Leo stood next to Naira, observing the crowd. There were no more whispers or looks of disdain. The Yllari had accepted him, and even more surprising, they had accepted humanity. For the first time, Leo felt like he truly belonged. Naira stood tall beside him, her presence commanding and regal as ever, but with a hint of something softer in her expression. She had changed, not just in how she viewed Leo, but in how she saw herself and her people. The fight had forced her to face her own pride, but it had also made her a stronger leader. She turned to Leo, her voice soft but steady. "I never imagined that one meeting would change everything." Leo nodded, his hands folded in front of him. "I didn't come here to change anything. I just wanted to show that humans have value, not just as soldiers, but as partners. We can help, we can learn, and we can grow with you." A smile crossed Naira's face. It wasn't the smile of a princess seeking to maintain power, but of a young leader who had discovered something new. "You've shown us that," she said, "and for that, I'm grateful." As they looked over the court, the mood had shifted completely. The nobles who had once looked at Leo with suspicion now approached him with respect. Warriors who had been skeptical of the humans now spoke openly with him, eager to exchange ideas. Even the youngest Yllari trainees were looking up to him, seeing him not just as a soldier, but as a symbol of what humanity could bring to their world. The alliance wasn't just political anymore. It was personal. At the center of the gathering, Naira raised her hand, calling for attention. The room quieted, and every eye was on her. Today, we celebrate more than just the joining of two worlds. We celebrate the possibility of a future where differences do not divide us, but bring us together. Today marks the beginning of a new alliance, one built on respect, understanding, and shared goals. The room erupted into applause, not out of obligation, but out of genuine hope. Leo could feel the weight of the moment settle in. He had helped change the course of history, but more importantly, he had helped change the hearts of the people around him. Naira turned to Leo, her voice softer now. You've shown me that humans have strength beyond what I could ever have imagined. And for that, I'm proud to stand beside you as an ally. Leo met her gaze, the quiet confidence in his eyes mirrored by the princess's own. The honor is mine, princess. As the celebration continued, the two stood together, not as a human and an alien, but as partners, equal in their vision of a united future. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, they faced it with certainty. Whatever challenges awaited them, they knew that they would face them together as allies. And in that certainty, they both saw the bright promise of the future they would build, one step at a time. The royal palace of Zaltharis stood tall against the bright blue sky, its towers reaching high, glittering in the light of two suns. Today, the palace seemed different. The air was charged with excitement, but this time, it wasn't because of an event or a ceremony. It was because of a change that had begun in the heart of the royal court. Inside the grand hall, Naira sat at the head of a long table, her face calm and composed. Around her were her trusted advisors, the highest-ranking Yilari nobles, and some of the warriors who had watched the fight between her and Leo. The room was filled with murmurs, but when Naira raised her hand, silence fell over the group. She looked at Leo, standing at the far side of the room, his posture still respectful, but different from the first time they had met. He had earned his place at this table, not by force, but through his actions and the respect he had shown, not just to her, but to everyone in the room. We've had many discussions, Naira began, her voice steady, about the role of Earth in the galaxy, about our people and their future. But today, I want to say something different. Her gaze moved over the faces of her court before landing on Leo. I've learned something important from our time together. I've learned that strength comes in many forms, and it is not about who is stronger, but about working together, understanding each other. The nobles exchanged glances, their eyes filled with curiosity. Leo watched Naira closely. He could see that her pride, though still present, had softened. She had changed, and she wasn't afraid to show it. You've earned a place here, Leo, Naira continued, standing up from her seat. Not just as a soldier, but as a friend and an ally. There was a brief moment of surprise, but it was followed by a few nods of approval. The room had already begun to shift. The Yilari were known for their pride, but even they could see the wisdom in Naira's words. The world was changing, and they had to change with it. Leo felt the weight of her words. He had come here to represent Earth, to show that humans weren't as weak as the galaxy thought. But now, in this room, in this moment, it wasn't just about that. It was about what he and Naira had created together, a bridge between their worlds. I'm honored, Princess, Leo said, his voice clear. And I'm proud to be an ally of the Yilari people. Naira smiled, and for the first time since their meeting, her smile wasn't one of pride or arrogance. It was genuine. Then let this be the beginning of a new chapter for both of us. The court looked on, some with suspicion, but others with hope. This moment, this shift in perspective, was something none of them had expected. But it was real. The alliance between Earth and the Yilari was no longer just a matter of politics. It was a matter of respect, of understanding, and of shared goals. As Naira and Leo walked together out of the grand hall, the doors closed behind them, sealing the new future they had begun to shape. No longer would they stand as enemies, as rivals. They would stand side by side, ready to face the challenges ahead. Together, Princess Naira stood frozen in the center, staring at the empty space where her blade had fallen. The air, thick with the dust of battle, seemed to hold its breath. All around her, the Yilari warriors and nobles watched in complete silence. Leo didn't move. He stood with his head lowered, his posture humble, giving her space to recover her composure. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't even smiling. He was simply waiting, standing as if the duel had never truly been about winning or losing. For a long moment, Naira didn't speak. Her breath was heavy, her chest rising and falling as she tried to regain her strength. The reality of the duel hit her like a wave. She had been bested, not through sheer strength, but through patience, skill, and humility. The realization stung harder than any blade could. Finally, Naira looked up. Her eyes, usually full of fire and pride, were now filled with something else, something she wasn't used to feeling. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even frustration. It was respect. She took a deep breath and, with a graceful movement, bent down and retrieved her blade. She didn't swing it this time. She didn't make any threatening gestures. Instead, she held it at her side and turned to face the crowd. Her voice rang clear and strong. "This human soldier," she began, her voice unwavering, "has proven something today. Not only to me, but to all of us." She paused, her gaze flickering briefly toward Leo. "That strength is not just about power. It is about discipline, heart, and the will to stand in the face of any challenge." The nobles looked at each other, murmuring amongst themselves. Some nodded. Others looked unsure, but Naira's words had already started to shift something deep within the palace walls. This was more than just a defeat for her. It was a lesson. And in that moment, she realized that Leo had taught her far more than she had ever anticipated. Leo didn't respond to her words. He didn't need to. He had already said what was needed with his actions. He hadn't humiliated her. He hadn't shown off. He had simply shown what a human could do when given the opportunity to prove himself. Naira stepped forward, lowering her blade to the ground as a sign of surrender. "I will not forget this," she said quietly, but loud enough for Leo to hear. "I was wrong about you, human." For a brief moment, their eyes met. Naira could see it now. The quiet confidence in Leo's eyes, the understanding that he had come to earn not just her respect, but the respect of the entire Yilari court. "I didn't come here to prove anything, Princess," Leo said, his voice calm. "I came here to show that humans, like Yilari, can learn and adapt. We're not so different after all." Naira said nothing for a moment. The weight of his words settled between them, filling the silence with a newfound understanding. She slowly nodded, her pride still there, but tempered by something much more important: respect.